My last investigation focused on the design of the old world. This time, my focus was on its construction. I was looking through archives of 19th century photographs, tracing the rapid, almost miraculous, growth of modern cities like Chicago, San Francisco, and Melbourne. I wanted to understand the engineering, the labor, the sheer will that built our modern world. I saw the official story of progress, new buildings, developing streets, the birth of the metropolis. The images purported to show cities rising from dust, from nothing, a testament to the tireless spirit of 19th century pioneers. The narrative was clean, simple, and clear. It was a story of linear advancement, from primitive to sophisticated. Or so I thought. But then, a detail emerged. A small but persistent absurdity that, once noticed, is impossible to ignore. It began as a flicker in the periphery, a visual inconsistency that I initially dismissed. In city after city, photograph after photograph, I saw the same impossible feature. Ornate windows crafted for light and air, sinking into the dirt. Grand doorways with intricate carvings that led not into a building, but into the solid ground of the sidewalk. This wasn't a rare anomaly found in one or two peculiar photographs, an oddity to be filed away. This wasn't an exception, it was the rule. The anomaly has a simple name, the submerged ground floor. But there is nothing simple about it. Let me be clear. These are not simple basements or cellars built for storage, with small, functional windows at ground level. Those exist, and they look nothing like this. We are talking about primary architectural features, the most expensive and visible parts of a building's facade. Designed to communicate status, beauty, and welcome. We are talking about towering, full-sized windows with intricate stonework, designed to flood a grand room with natural light. We see grand, welcoming arches, designed to be the main entrances for the public. We observe entire facades of magnificent, rusticated craftsmanship, a style meant to convey strength and permanence. All buried, several feet below the modern street level, as if the entire city had inexplicably sunk into the earth. Think about the implications of this. It is a fundamental violation of architectural and economic principles. These features were expensive. They required master craftsmen, immense labor, and the highest quality materials of the era. They were designed to be seen, to impress, to function as the primary interface between the building and the public. And yet, we are asked to believe they were built with the full intention of being immediately, or almost immediately, buried under tons of earth. An act of architectural self-mutilation. On a global scale, it defies logic, it defies economics, it defies sanity. The official narrative is straightforward and readily offered. We are told that as cities modernized in the 19th century, streets were raised to install new sewer systems and to level the ground for trams and traffic. A simple, practical explanation for a complex, worldwide phenomenon. It's an easy answer, one that requires no further thought. On the surface, this makes sense. Cities do evolve. They are not static. Infrastructure is updated, except the evidence on the ground tells a very different and far more complicated story. First, there is the question of economics, a question that is systematically ignored by mainstream historical accounts. Why would 19th century builders, working with limited budgets and rudimentary technology, invest fortunes, often the most significant portion of their budget, on creating magnificent ground floors with ornate details, only to bury them under tons of dirt just years later? It is a colossal waste of time, money, and artistry that has no parallel in the history of construction. We have detailed records of the budgets for canals, railways, and great monuments of that era. Yet for the supposed, even more massive, task of raising entire city grids by several meters, the financial records are mysteriously sparse. Where are the line items for millions of tons of landfill? Where are the payments to the tens of thousands of laborers? Furthermore, when we examine the material these buildings are buried in, it often isn't the expected layers of urban debris, a messy strata of broken brick, refuse, wood, and ash accumulated over decades of city life. In many excavated locations around the world, from New York to Russia, it is a thick, consistent, and uniform layer of mud, clay, and silt, as if deposited, all at once, by a liquid event. This is not the signature of urban development, it is the signature of a deluge. This isn't a story about one city. It is a story about almost all of them. A silent consensus written in buried stone. In Seattle, an entire underground tour takes you through the original, now subterranean, storefronts and sidewalks. A popular tourist attraction that treats a profound, global anomaly as a quirky local curiosity. In Chicago, old buildings have doors that open from the second floor directly onto the street. They are called Chicago doors, a quaint name for a deeply unsettling architectural feature. But the pattern goes further, much further, becoming a global signature that defies any local explanation. From the buried streets of Edinburgh, Scotland, where entire alleyways lie beneath the modern city, to the mysterious Shanghai tunnels of Portland, Oregon, a network of subterranean passages connecting the original ground floors of hotels and taverns. From the sunken cities of Italy, which are layered one on top of the other like a geological record of repeated destructions, to the grand buildings of St. Petersburg, Russia, and Melbourne, Australia, which show the exact same impossible features as those in Cincinnati or Boston. The same story is told in stone and earth across the entire planet. A grand, older world, sitting silently and patiently beneath our own. This is not a collection of local quirks, explained away by 100 different convenient, local stories. This is the fingerprint of a single, global event. How can we explain a global phenomenon with no official global cause? How do we account for architectural uniformity on a planetary scale in an age before global communication, before standardized building codes, before the internet? This is where the Tartarian framework becomes essential, not as a definitive conclusion, but as a necessary investigative tool to organize the overwhelming evidence. It suggests that these buried structures are not the first floors of our cities, but the top floors of theirs. They are the remnants of a worldwide civilization, the Tartarian Foundation of the Old World, that was wiped out by a great cataclysm, a mud flood, that buried their world and forced the survivors, our recent ancestors, to build on top of the ruins, often in a state of confusion and technological regression. In this framework, what we call our Victorian architecture may, in fact, be our buried inheritance, inherited buildings that our recent ancestors found sticking out of the mud, dug out the top floors of, cleaned up, and claimed as their own invention. They were not the brilliant builders of a new world, but the inheritors and repairmen of a broken one. Let us move away from theory and focus on the physical, verifiable evidence. First, the photographic record. In city after city, historical photographs from the 19th century show buildings standing at different ground levels than they do today. These are not slight variations. We see consistent, dramatic differences of 3, 4, sometimes 6 meters. The photographs are dated and catalogued. The buildings are identifiable. the ground level has demonstrably changed. Yet, the official documentation explaining how this was accomplished, the engineering plans, the budgets, the labor force required to raise an entire city grid, is consistently absent, or woefully inadequate. The visual evidence is irrefutable, but the procedural evidence is missing. Second, the nonsensical architecture and internal systems. Look at any old world city, and you will see the scars once you know how to look. Grand, arched windows on what is now a basement level, staring into a dirt wall. Ornate doors on the second or third floor that open into thin air, miles from any original staircase. But the anomalies continue inside. We find complex heating and ventilation systems in these buried levels that would only be functional if they were open to the air, pulling in oxygen for massive furnace systems. We find acoustics in these basements that rival modern performance halls, suggesting they were once grand public spaces. These are not design flaws. They are systematic features, suggesting the buildings were engineered for a ground plane several meters below our current street level. Third, the anachronistic precision and materials. Beyond just the buried levels, look at the construction itself. Examine the stonework. The joints are often tight beyond what hand tools should achieve. The proportions of the buildings follow sophisticated mathematical ratios, like the golden ratio, that weren't formally codified or widely used until later. We see evidence of materials and techniques, like cast iron facades and poured concrete foundations, appearing in buildings dated well before these technologies were supposedly invented or perfected. This isn't the crude, inconsistent construction of a pioneer society. This is sophisticated, mature engineering implemented at a global scale, suggesting the use of standardized tools and knowledge systems that do not appear in our official history of the era. Fourth, the geological layer. As mentioned, when excavations expose the strata beneath our cities, they often reveal something remarkable. It is not the expected, messy layers of urban accumulation, a chaotic mix of different materials from different decades. It is, in many key locations, a thick, consistent, and uniform layer of mud and silt. Geologists call this a liquefaction event. It is the signature of a deluge, an event where the ground itself behaves like a liquid, depositing meters of sediment rapidly and evenly. This is not the footprint of urban development, it is the footprint of a catastrophe. The evidence suggests the true burial was not of stone, but of memory. After the cataclysm, a new history had to be written to explain the world as it now stood. An era of forgetting was necessary. A constructed amnesia, the story of raising streets for sanitation, becomes the perfect, simple explanation to hide a terrifying and complicated truth that our world is built directly on the tomb of another, more advanced one. This new narrative masterfully explains away the buried flaws. It attributes the grand, inherited architecture to the supposed genius of our recent ancestors. And most importantly, it erases the memory of the civilization that truly built it, allowing a new timeline, a new history, a new sense of progress to be written from a fabricated starting point. And where is the proof of this cover-up? It is in the silence. It is in the gaps. It is in the deliberate lack of curiosity from mainstream academia. Where are the papers? The engineering contracts? The municipal meeting minutes debating the multi-decade, city, bankrupting task of burying entire ground floors? Where is the contemporary journalism documenting the immense disruption this would have caused to daily life and commerce? They do not exist in the quantity they should for a project of such monumental scale. The silence is the confession. The official narrative asks us to believe that builders worldwide were fools, spending fortunes on grand entrances only to bury them. It asks us to believe that raising entire cities was a common, unremarkable task, not worthy of detailed records. The physical evidence suggests they were geniuses, and that we are the ones living in ignorance of our true past. The pattern suggests we are not at the apex of history, but are merely tenants, living in the attics of a far grander mansion that we no longer have the keys to. We walk on their perfected floors and call them our streets. We inhabit their upper levels and call them our cities. We must therefore ask the most important question. It is not what lies beneath our streets, but what knowledge, what potential, what truth did we lose when we buried our own inheritance